Good morning. My name is Harvey Rose, Chairman of the Zionist Federation. I want to welcome all of you who have tuned in to this rather unique webcast. I'm absolutely convinced that if any other country's athletes were slaughtered in the way that the Israeli athletes were slaughtered, that there would have been a minute's silence. Shame on the IOC for its clear anti-Israel bias. Shame on the IOC for not appreciating and recognizing what the Olympics is all about. Many groups are showing their contempt for the IOC by remembering what happened 40 years ago. Last week there was a plaque unveiling in Hackney, attended to by London Mayor Boris Johnson and many other dignitaries. And there is also a gathering in Trafalgar Square this morning where a prayer will be recited. So we at the ZF and others are doing our bit to help right an outrageous wrong by holding our own commemoration service in memory of the 11 Israeli athletes who were murdered 40 years ago in Munich. We are pleased that MP Mr. Bob Blackman is here to talk to us, and we will hear from him shortly. But first, it's my pleasure to introduce His Excellency Daniel Taub, the Israeli ambassador. Daniel.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, when tens of thousands of people are gathering here in London to celebrate the opening of what we hope will be a wonderful Olympic Games, we are gathering, together with thousands of people joining us by webcast, to remember the darkest moment in Olympic history. The murder of 11 Israeli athletes in Munich was a tragedy for Israel and the Jewish people. Less than 3 decades after the end of the Shoah, we witnessed the murder of Jews as Jews on German soil. And it's a tragedy that we have to remember, particularly in a week when we've seen terrorism against Israelis strike again, as we saw in Bulgaria. But it's not just a tragedy for Jews and Israelis, because it was also a direct attack on the Olympic spirit. The hostage-taking of Olympic athletes in the Olympic Village during the Olympic Games was a direct assault on the Olympic values of peace and understanding through friendship and solidarity. And that's the reason why we believe that it needs to be commemorated publicly, appropriately, to show that those values have not been forgotten. That is why we are here. That is why we are remembering. And that is why we will never forget. I'd like to call on Bob Blackman, MP, to say a few words.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bob Blackman, the MP for Harrow East. Tonight, the eyes of the world will be on London, in East London and the Olympic Park in particular. It's a time for celebration, it's a time for showcasing Britain. And I look forward to a wonderfully successful Olympic Games. But it's also a time to look back. 40 years ago was the darkest hour of the Olympic movement. And it changed the Olympic movement forever. The Munich Games was intended to be very open, very friendly, and very relaxed and informal type of games. For the first week it was, but in the second week, the tragedy struck. 11 Israeli athletes and coaches were held at gunpoint and brutally murdered. It is a sad fact that we can't bring them back. But their memory must always be enshrined in the annals of the Olympic movement. We must always remember what happened, why it happened, and ensure it never happens again. I think it's a great shame. It's a great shame on the IOC, a great pity that those of us in the British Parliament were not able to persuade the IOC to hold a 1-minute silence at some stage during the Games. This September, on the 5th of September, I will be holding a debate in Parliament for 90 minutes. That's actually the anniversary of the massacre. We in Parliament can find 90 minutes to commemorate the fallen and the tragedy that struck. Unfortunately, the IOC can't find 1 minute in 6 weeks of Games. That's a shame on them. It's a shame on the Olympic movement, but there's still time. The IOC could, at some stage during these 6 weeks of the Games, offer an opportunity for a moment's peace and reconciliation, to build bridges between the communities and restore faith in the Olympic movement. I trust that they will see the wisdom of this so that the Olympic movement can move forward in the spirit to which it's always been intended, that of bringing nations together, celebrating people doing their utmost at the various different sports and activities that they value and have trained for many years. Those 11 athletes who lost their lives in Munich had trained for many years to compete in the Olympic Games. They never went home. Let us always remember them. Let us not forget, and let us hope that the IOC will see sense, see common sense, and allow all of us to have that 1 minute silence. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Paul Charney, the Zionist Federation. Thank you all for attending. There are those that wish us to forget. We will never forget. There are those that wish us to accept. We will never accept. I say to those that we gather here today in defiance of those that wish to eradicate the memories. Unfortunately, we find ourselves once again alone, standing here as a community. We find ourselves standing alone as a nation. But let me say to the families of the bereaved, and in memory of those that died tragic murders, you are not alone. We are here together as if it happened to each and every one of us, as if it happened today. Zichronam livracha. I'd like to introduce Jacob Vince, Chief Executive of Christian Friends of Israel. Your Excellency, Rabbi, ladies and gentlemen, the perpetrators of the massacre of the Israeli Olympic team in 1972 had a disregard for the sanctity of human life. Every life is precious, and this is a defining feature of Judaism and Christianity, as drawn from your writings, which we share, of the law, the prophets, and the Psalms, and for Christians, in addition, the apostles. Those who lose their lives in such a way as the Israeli Olympic team must always be remembered by us who live, through ensuring that proponents of any ideology that shows disregard for the sanctity of human life are exposed as impostors of peace, and by making sure the message that every human life is precious before God is heard loud and clear by today's generation. We at Christian Friends of Israel seek to show our friendship towards Israel and the Jewish community in 3 ways: education, primarily to our own constituency; advocacy alongside the Jewish community; and aid to humanitarian causes in Israel itself. As some here will know, there is also a considerable challenge within the church denominational structures, and most recently at the Church of England General Synod. In a debate of concern to Israel and the Jewish community, a serious attempt was made by some members, including myself, to provide a broader context, with the effect the largest number of abstentions in the final vote were recorded that I can remember in my 7 years as a member, but sadly not enough against to vote it down. We must all continue to do what we can, wherever we find ourselves, to ensure that those who value life, truth, and freedom prevail. The Apostle Paul wrote, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." May God give us all the faith that will enable such words to become a reality. I'd now like to introduce Rabbi Mervis.
I shall now recite the traditional memorial prayer for the 11 slain Israeli athletes. Yomale Rachamim Meshochena Pameromim Chametzim Enocha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utzahovim Kezohar Harakia Masirim Et Nishmot David Berger, Ze'ev Friedman, Yosef Gutfreund, Eliezer Halfin, Yosef Romano, Mark Slavin, Amitzur Shapira, Kahat Shor, Andrei Spitzer, Yaakov Springer, Moshe Weinberg. שהלכו לעולמם, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם, לכן פעל הרחמים, יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבם, ונאמר אמן.
As we remember David Berger, Ze'ev Friedman, Yosef Gutfreund, Eliezer Halfin, Yosef Romano, Mark Slavin, Amitzur Shapira, Kahat Shor, Andrei Spitzer, Yaakov Springer, and Moshe Weinberg, please join us in standing for 1 minute silence. That concludes our ceremony. Thank you very much for joining us.